Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sasha Farbach. The transatlantic relationship has entered a new phase of uncertainty after Donald Trump threatened fresh tariffs on European allies in an effort to pressure Denmark over Greenland. Now, as EU leaders meet to weigh their response, Brussels is openly debating whether to deploy its most powerful and untested tool, the anti-coercion instrument, often described as the bloc's trade bazooka. And what this moment ultimately reveals is not just how far the dispute could escalate, but how prepared Europe is to defend its sovereignty and unity and role in a changing world. To discuss it all further and how this measure works, we're now joined by Karolina Borońska-Hryniewiecka, political science expert, Team Europe Direct. Good to have you back on TVP World.
Good morning. It's a pleasure, always.
So let's jump into this coercion measure, this instrument, ACI. It's never been used. Is it a sword? Is it a shield? How does it practically work? What can it do?
Well, first of all, we have to state the facts. This is a pretty freshly constructed legal mechanism of the European Union. It was implemented by a regulation, so it's an act of law, and it gives the European Union, let's remind, the European Union has legal personality and it performs trade policy in the world autonomously. So it also has to be able to protect itself from certain behaviors, actions, coercion mechanisms by third parties. And this regulation, anti-coercion mechanism, allows European Union to respond to any sort of such actions, which we actually are observing at the moment, because this is exactly what the US is doing. It's pressuring the European Union, trying to subordinate it and its member states in order to give concessions to the United States to acquire Greenland. So it's sort of a blackmail based on economic threats. And this is exactly the moment where the European Union could use this so-called bazooka. So it allows the European Union, the Commission and the member states to retaliate, to basically respond politically targeted, in a politically targeted way, probably where the most vulnerabilities lie, so where the US would not expect it or would be really upset if it happened, and this way prevent the US from further, escalation of this, we would say, economic, geopolitical conflict.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask you on a couple of different points here, because one thing is that we know that Donald Trump does not really have much respect for the European Union. I mean, we've already heard that in certain types of also messages from his cabinet. I think just yesterday, Treasury Secretary said, oh, let's not worry too much about the dreaded working group. But nevertheless, this is something that does have teeth. I'm just wondering, in terms of how it's actually activated, as you said, it comes from a regulation. Does that mean it would need to be approved by all the member states? Is this trade policy? Does this qualified majority voting? How would this practically be deployed, and how long would that take?
Well, first of all, it has to start from a notification. Either a commission or any member state that feels that it's coerced can initiate activation of it. But activation of this mechanism is just the first step, which requires qualified majority vote by the Council. So member states, qualified majority vote means 55% of member states, so at least 15 of them will have to agree to use this mechanism. But that's just the first step. The second step is the question of how to do it and what exact measures can be deployed to target the third party, we would say the initiator, US in this case. And there are several options on the menu, and we have it in the regulations, so we can open it and read it and see what's possible. So first of all, it would be usually non-tariff responses that will target the third-party possibility to access the European single market. Very important thing for the US, because the US obviously makes a lot of money on access to European single market, usually and mostly in the area of services. So limiting the possibility of the US to invest to conduct financial operations, to invest in various areas. For example, there could be strict limits on public procurement procedures. So the US would not be able to take part in some of the bids, but also regulatory pressure, setting certain rules that will prevent the US from accessing the single market. But something also very important that's on the plate, and it has been discussed, is the fact that European Union and European Union member states and populations have a lot of savings, private savings, that are not invested in Europe, but are actually invested paradoxically in the US. We have to remember that Europe is America's largest lender. So we actually have a lot of European capital in the US. This could be also weaponized in a way. It's very complicated. It is a double-edged as well, but this is a very real leverage used within this bazooka, can be used within this bazooka.
But as you said, it's a double-edged sword, and it's something also ultimately, as you said, that trade between the EU and the US, I mean, that's mutual, right? That will also then hurt the European Union to a large extent. There's lots to uncover, but I want to ask you on this, and you said it does need only 55% what's so-called qualified majority voting of European countries, member states. We have already the two biggest member states, if we're looking at Germany and France. They're on different viewpoints on how to move this forward. I'm just wondering, we need a certain type of block here. Do we have that? And also with the timing, I'm going to throw in there as well the US-EU trade deal, which was supposed to go forward. The European Parliament has said that's going to not now be voted forward. There are a lot of different things in play here. So do we have that kind of unity? Where do you see this go?
Well, I see that the situation is evolving, and at the beginning there was confusion and nobody knew what to do, because this is a real madness. Even the most experienced analysts see Trump's actions as very destructive, not only for Europe, not only for US, but for the whole geopolitical international order. But coming back to the unity, we see that for the last 24 hours, the position of Germany is shifting towards more assertive, towards, yes, we have to show strength. And what's actually also positive and surprising is that its automotive sector, which is the most vulnerable to any sort of disruptions in transatlantic trade relations, has been also taking the position of, we need to react. We cannot allow for this blackmail to happen. So if we see this evolution on the German side, this is a very good sign for the European autonomous and quite, resolute response to the US, because we see that Trump is not going to respect any international law, any litigations. He doesn't need that. He has his own morality, as he says. This morality is guided by ego, and it's not guided by any sort of long-term strategic interest in keeping the peace and international order. So European Union basically has to show an equal resolve, an equal readiness to be radical. We have to threaten Trump in the same way it threatens Europe.
But, I mean, that word radical is not necessarily one that will be ever an operative word in European Union language. I mean, it's very much built on consensus, dialogue, slow movement, up to the brink, but never really crossing the line. Is this, I mean, we've had other great challenges in the European Union. Is this really going to be the one where the European Union will act in this way, do you think? Just briefly before we close.
Well, first of all, we have to say, if not now, then when? I mean, as Macron said very rightly yesterday, compliance and getting into subordination position is out of the question. And I think that slowly everybody realizes that. And to illustrate it, I just want to say, look at the far right reaction to what Trump is doing. Jordan Bardella delivered a speech saying clearly the EU has to respond firmly, and what Trump is doing is unacceptable. So if Trump's allies speak this in this language, I think we see some sort of qualitative, change in the way we are able as Europe to approach such blackmail.
Right, but of course there is still many different levels where any of this kind of goes across the board.
Very complex,
There's going to be a
yes.
lot of complex conversations. Look, thanks so much, but highlighting this has been really very, very interesting. Thanks so much, Karolina Borońska-Hryniewiecka there. Much appreciated. And thank you for watching. That concludes World Talks, but stay right here on TVP World for more news and commentary. Goodbye.